A common morality is one that all people have in common. Most often, this takes the form of human rights. This lecture looks at debates about common morality. It is the second of a two-part lecture. The first part looks at issues about cultural particularity of moral standards, and this second part looks at the basis for objective morality in Catholic moral tradition. What is objective morality? What is the basis for Catholic claims about objective morality? As we transition to our next topic, we turn our attention to these criticisms of a common morality. One says each person should choose moral standards to live by, and the other says that every situation is too unique for moral knowledge to be able to claim to guide us. These are not just claims that ethics is relative to a given culture. They question whether there is any objective basis for moral claims at all. For the next part of this lecture, we will look at the basis for moral claims in Catholic tradition and a Catholic contribution to discussions about common moral standards. Saying that there is objective morality simply means that there is a source of moral knowledge separate from what a person wills. This means each of us can be challenged by moral claims and look at our actions critically from a moral point of view. Ultimately, Catholic tradition bases objective morality on the revelation of God in Jesus Christ. Catholic tradition holds that Jesus is both fully human and fully divine. Christians believe Jesus helps people understand something about God. But at the same time, Jesus helps us understand something about what it means to be human. Human beings are capable of making God's grace present in history, just as Jesus did. Not perfectly, but God works in the world through people. Jesus teaches people how to be more like God and shows us how to respond to God in our lives. This serves as the basis for Catholic claims about objective morality, God's hope that human beings embrace the fullness of their humanity. Whatever makes us more fully human, we should value, and whatever estranges us from our humanity, we should avoid. From this basis, Catholic tradition makes four claims. First, there is an objective moral order. There are things that help us live more fully human lives. Second, we can learn about objective morality both through deliberation on human experience and through divine revelation. Third, when people sincerely disagree about what's right or wrong, the best response is dialogue. Fourth, people should follow a properly formed and informed conscience. This is a list of questions Catholic moral tradition encourages people to wrestle with. Some are specific to Christians, and others are questions any person might ask. As people wrestle with these questions, they gain moral insights, a sense of what's right or wrong, just or unjust. As Christians wrestle with these questions, they turn to four sources for insight: Bible and tradition, experience, and natural law. The term natural law may be new for some of us. Natural law is different from the law of nature. Natural law simply refers to reflection on what's morally right or wrong for people based on our understanding of what it means to be human and of how people relate with their world. A little bit about these four sources. The sources relate with each other. Insights we gain from one source can help us better understand another source. Bible and tradition are the two sources with a specifically sacred claim. Catholic tradition also holds that human experience and reflection on what's right or wrong for people can also yield moral knowledge. We will learn more about these four sources in the next few weeks. Today, we will look a little more deeply at the source of experience. Here are two ways for looking for moral insight in human experience. The first approach encourages us to search for moral insights in our world. Catholic tradition often uses a three-step process of see, judge, act to examine our experiences and understand better what promotes human flourishing. This is a cycle because our understanding of what works well for people expands as we reflect on our actions and note our successes and failures. The second model encourages us to pay attention to our hearts. We live in relationship with God, other people, ourselves, and our world. When we honor a person as a separate self, we can discern in our hearts a desire to treat the person well, to honor their personhood. This can be challenging. When we treat people like objects and pay too much attention to the way they help us advance our interests, we objectify the other. When we honor people as self-interpreting, living, choosing beings, we strive to respect them. We can draw an analogy between respect for people and our relationship with ourselves, God, and the earth. When we honor a relationship, we feel in our heart a desire for what's best. We've talked a little about where Catholic tradition teaches people to turn for moral knowledge. Let's look at how moral knowledge can guide us. Often Catholic tradition articulates moral knowledge in the form of principles. How we follow principles is subject to debate internal to Catholicism. In the Catholic moral tradition today, we find two major opinions about how moral knowledge should guide us. The first approach, sometimes called the classicist approach, emerges in the 19th century in countries where political secularization leads to discrimination against Catholics in public life. In these countries, Catholics were banned from public employment and from holding public office. In this political climate, moral theology tended to teach people to hold fast to the truths of Catholic teaching about what's right or wrong, just or unjust. People were taught to let the moral principles of Catholic tradition guide their actions. The second approach, called the personalist approach, emerges following World War I. It emphasizes the humanist values of Catholic tradition. While the classicist approach uses moral principles to guide actions, this approach uses principles to guide perceptions. When looking at the world, people weigh things based on how they impact their principles. Then they respond to what they perceive. This is a little abstract, so let's look at it another way and with the help of an example. The classicist approach reasons deductively. When a person encounters a situation that calls for action, she's encouraged to find the right moral principle to follow in that situation, and then she's encouraged to follow it. So, if our dad asks, "Hey, what do you think of my new hat?" We've been asked for information. The moral principle that applies here is to tell the truth. A deductive application of this principle applies then to our actions. We have a moral obligation to tell Dad what we think of his hat. The personalist approach, in contrast, reasons inductively. The moral principle to tell the truth calls us to pay attention to how our communication supports the whole of our relationship with our dad. Dad wants to know what we think of his hat. We don't just look at how well our words reflect our opinion. We look at how what we say impacts our dad. We do not want to hurt his feelings, so we should respond to our dad in a way that honors the whole of our relationship with the man. And that's not just about what we think about his hat. In Catholic moral tradition, moral principles inform our practical reasoning, not our abstract theoretical reasoning. So we need to pay attention to the context in which we're acting. One way of thinking about this is to see moral norms as operating on three levels: universal principles, middle axioms, and concrete materials. At the broadest level, moral principles are universal. They apply to all people, but they're incredibly vague and abstract. They say things like, tell the truth, promote health, respect human life, treat people justly, consume moderately the things that make you feel good, care for the natural environment. We also have principles that work at a middle level. They help us pay attention to important features of the context where we act. For example, when we tell the truth. Some of the middle axioms we pay attention to include: only give information to people who have a right to that information. Sustain our relationships as we communicate. Speak with love. Share information responsibly, which means we may not give information to someone if we think that they're not going to make a responsible use of it. And lastly, speak humbly, because even when we speak truthfully, the information we have is only as good as our understanding of the subject. And at the level of action, we have concrete materials. For people who reason deductively, this is how we apply moral rules to our actions. Specific rules apply for actions again and again. For people who reason inductively, this is how we respond to our perception of a situation. Every time we act, we respond to a specific situation once. The next time we act, the situation will be different, so we may need to act differently. Recall the objections to common morality that say everyone should choose their own morality, and that each situation is too unique for us to claim knowledge that guides us. Catholic moral tradition responds by saying ethics should have relativity without relativism. As we apply moral knowledge to situations, we need to account for who we are and where we are. But this does not mean we cannot benefit from moral knowledge that helps us understand how our actions impact others, ourselves, the earth, or our relationship with God. In summary, a common morality is one that all people hold in common. Most often, this takes the form of human rights. People object to common morality for a range of reasons. Some people think ethics is particular to a given culture. Others remain skeptical about an objective basis for any moral knowledge. Catholic tradition bases objective morality on what it believes about God's revelation in Jesus. We should value what helps people become more fully human. And the four sources of Christian ethics help people understand what allows us to be more fully human. Moral knowledge either guides our actions or helps us perceive our values in a situation. We need to adapt our actions to specific situations, but this doesn't disrupt altogether the basis for objective morality.